Is it working? It doesn't work. Switch off this.
We try. Das ist ein neues System, ich kenne das alte.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 So we're reading from Canto 4 of Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 28, and chapter is called Puranjana becomes a woman in the next life. And today's verse is exactly describing this event, this special event when Puranjana becomes a woman in the next life. So kindly repeat word by word. Tam Eva Manasa Grinam Babhuva Pramada Uttama Anantaram Vidarbhasya Rajasinghasya Vishmani Tam eva manasa grinam Tam eva manasa grinam Babhuva pramadotama Babhuva pramadotama Anantaram vidarbhasya Rajasinghasya Vishmani Tam eva manasa grinam Babhuva pramadottama Anantaram vidarbhasya Rajasinghasya Vishmani
Tam eva manasa grinam Babhuva pramadotama Anantaram vidarbhasya Rajasimhasya Vishmani
Tam eva manasa grinam Babhuva pramadottama Anantaram vidarbhasya Rajasimhasya Vishmani
Tam eva manasa grinam Babhuva pramadottama Anantaram vidarbhasya Rajasimhasya Vishmani
Tam eva manasaglinam
Tam eva manasaglinam
Babhuva pramadottama
Babhuva pramadottama
Anantaram vidarbhasya
Anantaram vivayasya
Rajashimaya Veshmani
Rajasinghasya Veshmani
Tam eva manasaglinam
Tam eva manasaglinam
Babhuva pramadottama
Babhuva pramadottama
Anantaram vidarbhasya
Anantaram vidarbhasya
Rajasinghasya Veshmani
Rajasinghasya Veshmani Tam, her, Eva, certainly, Manasa, by the mind, Rinam, accepting, Babhuva, became, Pramada, woman, Uttama, highly situated, Anantaram, after death, Vidarbhasya, of Vidarbha, Rajasinghasya, of the most powerful king, Veshmani, at the house. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. King Puranjana gave up his body while remembering his wife, and consequently, in his next life, he became a very beautiful and well-situated woman. He took his next birth as the daughter of King Vidarbha in the very house of the king. Purport. Since King Puranjan thought of his wife at the time of death, he attained the body of a woman in his next birth. This verifies the following verse in Bhagavad Gita, 8th chapter, verse 6. Yang yang vapi smaran bhavam tyajatyante kalevaram tam tam evaiti kaunteya sada tad bhava bhavitaha. Whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, that state he will attain without fail. When a living entity is accustomed to think of a particular subject matter or become absorbed in a certain type of thought, he will think of that subject at the time of death. At the time of death, one will think of the subject that has occupied his life while he was awake, lightly sleeping or dreaming, or while he was deeply sleeping. After falling from the association of the Supreme Lord, the living entity thus transmigrates from one bodily form to another, according to nature's course, until he finally attains the human form. If he is absorbed in material thoughts and ignorant of spiritual life, and if he does not take shelter under the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Govinda, who solves all questions of birth and death, he will become a woman in the next life. Especially if he thinks of his wife. As stated in Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, 31st verse, verse 1, Karmana daiva nitrena. A living entity acts piously and impiously, and sometimes in both ways. All actions are taken into account, and the living entity is offered a new body by his superiors. Although King Puranjan was overly attached to his wife, he nonetheless performed many pious fruitive activities. Consequently, although he took the form of a woman, he was given a chance to be the daughter of a powerful king, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, 6th chapter, verse 41. Praprapunya kritam lokam ushitva shashvati samaha suchinam srimatam gehe yoga vrashto vijayate. The unsuccessful yogi, after many years of enjoyment on the planets of the pious living entities is born into a family of righteous people or into a family of rich aristocracy. If a person falls from the path of Bhakti Yoga, God realization, due to attachment to fruitive activity, philosophical speculation or mystic yoga, he is given a chance to take birth in a high or rich family. The higher authorities appointed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead thus render justice to the living entity according to the living entity's desires. Although King Puranjan was overly absorbed in thought of his wife and thus became a woman, he took birth in the family of a king due to his previous pious activities. The conclusion is that all our activities are taken into consideration before we are awarded another body. Narada Muni therefore advised Vyasadeva that one should take to Krishna consciousness, devotional service, and abandon all ordinary occupational duties. This advice was also given by Lord Sri Krishna himself. Although a devotee may fall from the path of spiritual consciousness, he will nonetheless attain a human body in the home of a devotee or a rich man. In this way, one can resume his devotional service. So, the Om Jnana Timirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshushu Militam Yanam Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So, the question of reincarnation, or transmigration of the soul, is very important. And one of the great achievements of His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada, was that he very definitely and very scientifically preached this philosophy of transmigration of the soul. Before Srila Prabhupada's travel to the West and his publication of the Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, Isha Upanishad, and many other scriptures, Chaitanya Charitamrita, not many people were aware of the fact that we are immortal and that once we leave this specific body that we have now, we will transmigrate to another body. In fact, it is scientifically corroborated by the fact that we, in the present body, experience what we call transmutation of our tissues. There is change constantly going on within the body. Yes? This change, the name of this process is transmutation, transformation of the cells. Within our body we have cells, we have organs, and each organ is composed of cells. These cells are small biological entities, living actually. They're actually alive, the cells within our body. It is not that they're just dead matter, right? And they are changing constantly. They're changing constantly. Transmutation is a scientific fact. The doctors have proved that, for example, within our digestive system, within the bowels, the cells change every 7 years. And it's interesting that it's the number 7 is scientifically proved. There's transformation in our body which is constantly going on each 7 days, 7 months, 7 years. And this is scientifically analyzed. There's a transformation going on within our body. We are born and our cells are in a specific situation, and then within 7 weeks they change. In fact, this change in the bodily structure is going on not only when we are born, after our birth, but even before our birth, when we are in the womb of the mother. There's a development, there's a change, there's a constant change of the cells within the body. This is going on. It's not that we always have the same body. We change our body within this life. We change our body within the womb of the mother. Then when we are born, we start changing our soul body. So this process of transmutation or transformation of the body is a fact, it's a scientific fact. Srila Prabhupada sometimes was confronted with people who said, this reincarnation business is nonsense. There's no question of changing bodies after we finish this body. And once this body is finished, everything's finished. People are, in general, worldwide, people are convinced of this, that I live only once. I was born and I die. Before I was born there was nothing, and after I die there was nothing. But that contradicts the fact that during our whole lifetime we're changing. There's changes going on. Why should, and Krishna explains that in the Bhagavad Gita also, that even if you don't believe in this thing, you should not lament it. He explains to Arjuna. Yes. Even if you don't believe these things. But the fact of the matter is that Krishna explains to Arjuna that these things are real, these things are true. Dehinosmin yata dehe komaram yovanam jara. Komaram yovanam jara. When you're little children, komara. When you become youthful, yovanam. Or jara, when you become old, there's transformations in the body going on. So it is not very logical to think that before we were born there was nothing, no transformation. And then after we die, there's nothing, there's no transformation, there's nothingness. The idea that that something, that's also a very illogical statement, that something comes from nothing. We don't have experience of that something comes from nothing. Something always comes from something. It doesn't exist that, something comes from nothing, right? So, similarly, we cannot say that we have been born from nothing. And that Krishna explained that in the Bhagavad Gita also, that those who are demonic, asuri, that they think that everything is simply caused by sexual attraction, that some kind of chemicals mix together, and then from that mixing of the chemicals come another chemical. Yeah? And these chemicals, at a certain point, they disintegrate. Right? And Srila Prabhupada always asks, so where do the chemicals come from? You say, okay, so it's a chemical reaction, but where do the chemicals come from? Even if we do not consider the fact of the life itself, and if we just concentrate on the chemicals themselves, without speaking of life, so where did the chemicals come from? So, for example, we have water. Water is hydrogen, oxygen, HO2, right? Chemical analysis. So where does the H come and where does the O2 come from? They cannot come from nothing, right? The elements themselves, the chemical elements, they have a cause also. They're coming from somewhere. Someone caused them to be. It's not that they appeared suddenly, automatically. This is ignorance to think like that. So human life means, actually a human being, definition of a human being, according to logics, Aristotelian logics, is that human beings are rational animals. We are also animals, no doubt. Just like the animals have to eat, sleep, they have to mate, they have to drink and eat and everything. These are activities we share with the animals or even with the plants. When I look at the plants outside here from the temple and I see these poor plants, or these trees mainly, are becoming brown because there's no water there. So they're dying off, they're becoming very weak. So speaking about just about the elements, right? As a rational animal, rational means that we have a reason. We can reason. We can think about our existence. We can rationally analyze our existence, why we're here, right? Otherwise, we're just animals. If we don't use our ratio or reasoning, we're just animals, which is very unfortunate, right? Very unfortunate if we are not rationally thinking. So anyhow, where do all the elements come from? We see the chemical elements around us. There's so many chemical reactions going on. There's so many chemicals within this material world which we see around us, right? Not only water, there are many others. We know that there are, I think, 90 elements according to the Mendeleev structure of the matter, right? There are, I think, 90 or a little more elements. If someone knows how many in Mendeleev? Mendeleev was a very great Russian scientist, and he analyzed the world that has about 90 elements. And there's even radioactive elements which were discovered at the start of the 20th century. Right? Radium, for example. These are elements, actually chemical elements. There's the elements which are solid, there are the elements which are liquid, and there are the elements which are gaseous, and there are the elements which are radioactive, which disintegrate by themselves and create radiation. Some of these radiations can be very dangerous for life. They can actually destroy life. So anyhow, where do these elements come from? Now, that's a very rational question. Where do these elements come from? Oh, they just appeared. From where? Who? Who created these elements, right? So a rational questioning is very important for us. Similarly, when we come back to the subject matter of life itself, where does the life come from? If we are thinking that the life comes from the chemicals, right, then we have to somehow or other be able to create life in a laboratory. That was Prabhupada's and his followers' reasoning. There was one of my godbrothers who, in 1977 it was, I think, who challenged some scientists to create life. And he said that he must prove that scientifically that life comes from chemicals. So you please find the chemicals and create life. Usually the answer is very simple. Oh, we do it later, right? Which is a evasive answer. It's not a logical answer. If I ask you, create life from chemicals, if you say that life comes from chemicals, then please, please, please create life from chemicals. So there was one scientist in Sri Lanka, in Ceylon, who said actually that life comes from chemicals. So this, my godbrother, he challenged him and asked him, so please prove it. If you don't prove it, then the chicken is a better scientist than you. Yes, because a chicken can create life. No problem. Yeah. So he challenged this scientist that a chicken is better than you, big scientist. The chicken can create life, but you cannot create life, right? In your laboratory. You just take some albumin, which is the white substance in the egg, and you take some yellow protein containing yellow substance, which is the yellow part of the egg. You make an artificial cell, right? And a covering, a special like ceramic covering of the egg, right? And you have all the elements. You can just go and create these things, and once you create the egg, the artificial egg, which looks like an egg with all the chemicals in it, and make it in a chick, a small chick. Try to make it in a small chick, the egg. So Dr. Kapoor was his name, Professor Kapoor. He said, "Oh, I cannot do that. I can make an egg with all these chemicals, but no life will come out from that egg." So therefore my godbrother said, "Well, the chicken is better than you, because the chicken can create an egg, and from the egg, if it's fructified after some time, the little chick comes out of the egg. Life comes from that little egg, right? But your chemicals don't create life. No chance." So there was it was nice, and Prabhupada was very pleased with my godbrother. Because all these discussions went in the media, in the newspapers. It was published in the newspapers. And people were laughing like anything at this scientist, Dr. Kapoor, who claimed that life comes from the chemicals, that he couldn't prove it. He was challenged, please prove it. If you don't prove it, then the chicken is a better scientist than you are. And it's a fact. So, the transformation or transmutation of the cells within our body takes place. Similarly, it takes place, why? Because there is a spirit, soul within the body which causes these transmutations to go on. It's the life that creates matter. It's the life that makes matter transfer, right? Let's take a lemon tree. A lemon tree in its life produces hundreds and hundreds of liters of citric acid. The life within the lemon tree creates chemicals. Yeah? We also create chemicals. Yeah? For example, we create water, salt water from our body. We actually, because we are in the body, the spirit soul, we create enzymes, which is called. Yeah? The chemicals within our body which allow us to digest. The living spirit in this body, we create oxygen, hydrogen. We could create so many chemicals within our body. Not only these, but we spoke about it with our scientific person here, that we also are full of electricity. Yeah? Yesterday we spoke about electricity. Electricity is everywhere. Even within our body there is electricity. Because we are spirit soul, we create electricity. Electricity doesn't come just from some kind of chemical reactions, but we actually create electricity within ourselves. That's how, for example, at a certain point there was the big discovery by the scientist, which is called quantum mechanics. Yeah? which includes us living beings within the activities of the cosmos. That's, in a nutshell, one of the principles of quantum mechanics. Not only that, but that principle of quantum mechanics is applied also in electronics. For example, most of you have, I think so, you have a mobile phone or one of these smartphones which has a touch screen, right? And it was discovered that you are also charged with some electricity. So you touch the touch screen and you can touch an app or a number or whatever is on your touch screen, and the electronic device, the computer or the tablet or the smartphone opens some kind of app. You can use the iPhone for telephoning, etc., etc. But put on a glove. Put on a normal glove, you know, and try to touch the touch screen. There's an interaction which cannot go on because the electricity of your body, your charge, doesn't go into the app. So therefore, the app just doesn't work. The computer or the iPhone doesn't work. So even we have, in ourselves, we have electricity which we create by our presence within the body. So life creates matter. Life creates even the energy which we call electricity. We are charged with a specific charge of electricity, and that was discovered recently. It's not an old discovery. We are charged with electricity ourselves. We are participating within the chemical reactions going on within our body and all around us also. Actually, when we spoke yesterday of electricity, Srila Prabhupada gave a very nice example, and that is that electricity is not itself manifesting, it has to have some human being behind it, some living spirit. For example, here in Zurich, there's a big central exchange place where all the electricity is being distributed through the town. And there's somebody there who pushes a button, and this way there's light in the streets, there's light in our temple. You know, without that human being being there, it just doesn't work. Now somebody can say, oh, today we have artificial intelligence, it will go on automatically, we don't have to actually participate in this process. No, because you have to program the artificial intelligence at the very start, at the very initial place. Then it can go on. Oh, no, it's going automatically, you know, there's some automation. But at the start of the automation, there's someone who has to program it. You know? And that someone is a living being. You cannot say that matter itself creates itself, or electricity is distributed or created even itself, you know. It has to have, at origin, a living entity, a living being, right? So this knowledge, therefore, was a very nice book which we published in German and other languages. Leben kommt von Leben. Life comes from life, right? It's not that life comes from matter. Not only Leben kommt von Leben, or life comes from life, but even matter comes from life. We cannot say that matter came automatically. We have the whole Bhagavatam. There's many descriptions in the Srimad Bhagavatam which explain how the elements, one after another, have been created from the input of Mahavishnu, of Chirodakashayi Vishnu, specifically in our universe, Garbhodakashayi Vishnu. These living Vishnu Tattva beings are the cause of the material energy manifesting. The material energy doesn't just manifest like from nothing, right? That's why at the start I was speaking, so where does the chemicals come from, right? The chemicals come from the highest living being. It's not that, like Prabhupada also said, we create in our body, we create salty water, sweating. Yeah, if you taste your sweat, if you're sweating, or Pujari, for example, in the morning, I've noticed he sweats like anything. He's very hot because he has a very big body, you know. So this, if you take this sweat, put it on your tongue, you'll say it's salty. So we can create a few milligrams, or if you are very, very much sweating, we can produce a few centiliters or milliliters of salty water, right? It's not that this salty water is the same, basically, from the composition, maybe a little more concentrated, as the salty water within this planet. It also comes from some living entity. It doesn't manifest from itself. We create a little bit of water, but Garbhodakashayi Vishnu creates so much water that it fills the half of our universe, right? And also we know that Karanakashayi Vishnu, he lies on the ocean, which is from his sweat also. Karanakashayi Vishnu. He creates the causal ocean from his pores of his body. And from the pores of his body also emanate unlimited universes, which are within which enters Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, and he creates the Garbhodaka ocean, right? So the ocean on our planet is also created by a living entity. It's not that it comes automatically. So all this knowledge is conclusively that the living entity is the cause of matter, the cause of life, and also the living entity is the cause of transmigration and transformation within our bodily structures. So the transmutation of the tissues and the transmigration of the soul, these are the cause, they are caused by the presence of the soul. That if the soul leaves the body, if we die, right? As an infant, for example, it happens that an infant dies prematurely after a few months or years of life. There's no more transmutation of the tissues. It doesn't take part. The only transmutation which actually then appears is the disintegration of the tissues. Transformation means from one situation to another, and from the creation to the disintegration of tissues. So the child doesn't grow anymore. There's no more transmutation in his body. All the cells die, disintegrate at a certain point. Dust, what is it called? Dust I are, dust I were, dust I will be. Yeah? You come from dust. I think when there's the funeral, when you go to the cemetery or to the crematorium, the priests usually say, dust I were, dust I are, dust I will return to dust again. Right? So this, he said, dust I were, die, you were dust, you are dust, and you will return to dust. It's not a fact. The body is dust. It's stated also in the Bhagavatam and several points that at the end of our life, when the body disintegrates, the cells lose their, the life is not anymore there. So the body becomes either dust, when you put the body in the soil, then the body disintegrates. Maybe some bones remain longer, but they don't remain also eternally. Also they disintegrate. The tissues of the body, they disintegrate, right? They just become soil. Or if you go to a crematorium, if they put your body in the crematorium, then there is only ashes left from your body. First there's only dust, if you put your, or if you put the body in the crematorium, you burn it, there's only ashes left. Yeah? Or in Tibet, for example, in the higher regions of the Himalayas where there's no wood to burn people and where there is no soil to bury them in. So what they do, they cut the body into pieces and offer it to the vultures. It's even they have they make like a prasadam for the vultures. You know, that's the issue of this material body. You know, either dust, ashes, or food for the vultures. And when the vultures eat the body, they pass stool, right? They have their excrements from the vultures. So that's the future of our body, right? So this is not very reasonable to identify oneself with this material body. It's not very reasonable, because so we are the life within the body, right? We are the spirit which animates this body. Not only animates the body, it makes it warm. That's also interesting. Our body, when we are healthy, has a normal temperature which is 36.7, if I remember well. That's our normal bodily temperature. But when you touch, if you touch a dead body, it's cold. There's no heat within that body. It's just cold like a stone, basically. Has no temperature. It's just cold because it's just dead. The word is proper. It's just dead matter, which is slowly but surely disintegrating. Within a few weeks, it just becomes just dust and or something very unhealthy, right? So, to come back to this today's verse, in this verse it is described how King Puranjana became a woman in his next life, because he was thinking of a woman, of his wife, of his beautiful dear wife, at the moment of his death. So that is the description of the transmigration of the soul, which takes place after the disintegration of the tissues, or the end of the one material body. So this constant transformation, transmigration, these are the realities of material existence. It is not that something remains static. For example, even this city of Zurich, you know, in 10,000 years, what will remain of this city? You know, there is a transformation going on. It's not that the city will remain constantly. It will also disintegrate. The mountains we are now, for example, experiencing in the Alps, there's a disintegration of the glaciers. The glaciers are melting away. Just, you know, they were there for thousands of years, from time immemorial, practically you can say, and they are receding, disappearing, melting, just melting away. Transformation. So within this world, we see so much transformation is going on, and we should understand with our ratio, with our reason, we should be reasonable, that there is transmigration, which is also a form of transformation. The soul within the body transfers itself, that's called the transformation or the transmigration. The soul transmigrates from one body to another, and according to the desires and the thoughts we have at the moment of death, we attain another body, right? This is very important to understand. Unfortunately, there is no department. Prabhupada was always in this connection very sorry that there's no department at the universities anywhere in the world which analyzes the difference between life and death. How comes there's a difference doing life and doing death? what causes this transformation from life to death? And there's no scientific discipline in this connection. There's, of course, in religions, specifically in the Christian tradition, there is a science which they call eschatology. Eschatology means... Eschatology? Eh? I think it's in Ukrainian also. Eschatology. It's a scientific term. Eschatology means the science of what happens after death. Eschatologia. It's from the Latin. What happens after death? The last things. Eschatologia. Which means the last things which happened after we die. The last things. Right? Is it? So this last thing, what happens at that moment, it's very important to understand. Suddenly, there's a living being there with breathing and speaking with people and talking and right? And suddenly, zap! Nothing is there. It's completely finished. So the Bhagavad Gita explains very clearly that the soul is never born and it never dies. Na jayate mriyate va kadachin nayam bhutva bhavita vana bhuya ajo, never born, nitya, always, ajo nitya, sasvato. Sasvato means it's always permanent. Ajo nitya sasvato yam purana means that it's the oldest. Actually, the soul existed even before the creation of all the universes. We are ever existing. We have never ceased to be, and we will never cease to be. That is the beautiful teaching of the Bhagavad Gita. Once one realizes, even intellectually, not in full, spiritually, that one is eternal, then naturally, Brahma Bhuta, Prasanatma, one becomes very happy. So, King Puranjana appeared again as a woman, even in his own kingdom, which is incredible. He was very fortunate that he could appear as a human being, as a beautiful girl. I would read maybe again this verse today. King Puranjana gave up his body while remembering his wife, and consequently in his next life he became a very beautiful and well-situated woman. He took his next birth as the daughter of King Vidarbha in the house of the king. Yes? So just I will read from the purport from Srila Prabhupada once again. After falling from the association of the Supreme Lord, the living entity, the living being, the living soul, thus transmigrates from one bodily form to another according to nature's course, until he finally attains the human form. If he is absorbed in material thoughts and ignorant of spiritual life, and if he does not take shelter under the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead Govinda, who solves all questions of birth and death, he will become a woman in the next life, especially if he thinks of his wife. As stated in Srimad Bhagavatam, Karmana Daiva Netrina, a living entity acts piously and impiously, and sometimes in both ways. All actions are taken into account, and the living entity is offered a new body by his superiors. Daiva Netrina. Superiors means the Daiva. All of our activities, all of our thoughts, all of our desires are monitored. Nowadays we live in a world of monitoring. We are monitored. You are being filmed everywhere you go, right? There's one country where this works absolutely flawlessly, and that's China. If you go to China, you're constantly filmed by thousands and thousands of cameras. China is incredible in this connection. They know exactly where you are. For example, you walk across the red light on a pedestrian crossing, and you have a red light, right? And there's a camera there which films you and there's facial identification system in the computers they have nowadays. This facial identification is very powerful. They know exactly where you are, who you are, when you were born, where you were born, what's your occupation, who's your wife, everything, to the last detail they know about you. So when they found out that you've crossed 3 times at a red light, they will make something with your job. You can be kicked out from your job, for example. You can be blocked for your bank account. Or you cannot be allowed to go to study at the university if you have been, for example, seen somewhere which is not authorized in China. It's incredible. You are being constantly observed by the camera systems and facial identification system. So do you think that this doesn't work at the higher level of the Daiva? Of course it works. And how does it work? Because Yamaraj is aware of all the living entities since time immemorial, right? And he determined Daivanitrena, what will be our next birth according to the activities. We can be, in the 5th canto described, we can go to hell, we can go to some hellish planet and there be tortured by horrible living entities, the Yamadutas or others, So we are being monitored, our existence is being monitored, not only doing, the only place where they cannot actually, I would say, monitor us, these cameras, is during our sleep. But Yamaraj can do that. He can also monitor our thoughts and our dreams when we are sleeping. Yeah? So the transmigration of the soul is not a question of some kind of a random chance, but it is determined by the way we live, by the way we think, by the way we dream, by our desires. So the living entity has to go on and on and on from one body to another and actually suffer or enjoy accordingly. All actions are taken into account and the living entity is offered a new body by his superiors. Mm-hmm. So Prabhupada also describes other aspects of the transmigration, like if you are a devotee and somehow or other in this life you don't make it, you fall from the bhakti path or the spiritual realization, you can continue in a better family. You were born, in Bhagavad Gita is described, Suchinam Samatam De Gehe, you can be born in a family of rich people or poor people. This is a fact. Okay, so thank you very much for your attention, for those who have attended. And thanks to Srila Prabhupada for giving us all this knowledge and helping us understand who we are and in what situation we are and why we are here and why we are not there, etc., etc. Through these very interesting, fascinating stories like Puranjana or the story of King Bharat, how he became a deer in his next life, and then he became Bharat, Jada Bharat, the very simple and simple soul, and then liberated. Hare Krishna. Anyone has a question or a comment?
You mentioned about the elements, and I'm always wondering, in the science we know the periodic table.
Yeah, the periodic table.
And in the Vedas we always say the earth, fire, air, ether elements.
Right.
So do you know how they will connect?
Of course, you just there's so many other elements in the ether. There's so many elements in earth. There's so many elements which are liquid and watery, liquid. And then there are the ethereal elements, which are also can be broken down. Water, ether, water, earth, water, fire also. There are fire elements. So the periodical elements are simply detailed or let's say breaking down the four essential elements. Yeah, there are the four elements, and they're divided into 90 different elements. But as the essence of these are the four elements, which we know: earth, water, fire, and
With the elements fire and ether, I have difficulties because, I mean, which element can make space?
Sorry?
Which element can make space?
No,
because ether is space as far as.
What I mean to say is that the ether divides into many different elements. Ether divides in fire, divides in. For example, radiation is a form of fire. You understand?
Mm-hmm.
Ether is space, and in space there are black holes, for example, right? Nebulas and things like that, which they describe in the scientific literatures by observation, by empiric observation. The problem of empiric observation, which is the basis of modern science, empiric observation, is that all these empiric observations are made with imperfect senses, ultimately. And therefore the reductionist attitude of the scientists, which is the scientific attitude of today, reductionist, we reduce everything to things which can be measured and weighed, observed, right? Those things which cannot be observed, weighed or measured, we are not concerned with them. That's reductionism. We reduce our scientific world or scientific view on the things that we can measure, weigh, observe, right? Things which we cannot observe, cannot weigh, cannot measure, we disregard them. That's reductionism. We reduce our knowledge to this amount, right? But the Vedas, or knowledge which is apaurusheya, which is knowledge from a person who is not limited by these senses, and therefore this knowledge cannot be understood by reductionistic methods. That means weighing. The same goes with the soul. The reductionist attitude towards spirit, which is the 25th element. The Sankhya philosophy in third canto describe these elements are broke down to many more elements. It's not the four, it's 25. So the 25th element is the soul. But in the reductionist attitude, there's no question of the soul because it cannot be measured, it cannot be weighed. Although there were some scientific people who were weighing the dead body and weighing the living body, and when it died, they found there was some grams missing. So they thought, the soul weighs that much and that much. That may be, but that's not a real scientific attitude. But the fact of the matter is that the soul cannot be measured and weighed and observed even by microscopes or by some device, So therefore the reductionists say there's no soul, because this is just simply based on faith, on belief, on dogma, they even say, the religious dogma, ideology. But the fact of the matter is that this knowledge is apaurusheya, it's given by the higher authorities, which are not limited. Apaurusheya means the Supreme Personality of God. It has no imperfections like we have. Limited senses, tendency to cheat, imperfect senses, right? All these different imperfections we have. So the knowledge given by God is perfect, and those who understand this, they can go beyond the reductionist ideology and understand the elements more, that there are much more subtle elements than, of course, only the four, Bhumi, Apana, Vayu, air, right? So air also can be broken down to so many different elements. Anything gaseous is a part of air, any gas. any fiery element, including radiation. Radiation is a form of fire. If you, for example, are exposed to radiation, what happens to your body? Ukrainians can say so because they had Chernobyl. It disintegrates, it burns. It burns completely it doesn't burn through a hot fire, there's burning of a cold fire also. You know? We know fire as something burning hot, right? But there's something like which is cold fire, and that's radiation. Radiation is a form of fire, of cold fire. Your body just simply burns to ashes, basically speaking, through a cold fire. You cannot even stop it. You can put out a hot fire with water, with foam, with so many different kind of chemicals. You can put out a hot fire, right? You are a specialist in electricity. There is some ways of putting out electric fires, but not with water. That even increases the fire. Therefore, you cannot just dump a bucket of water when there is an electrical, fire. There are different chemicals. But with radiation, it's terrible because there's no way to stop the chain reaction of the radiation, right? There's no way to stop it. So there's no medicine that can help you when you get a full dose of radiation, which is a fire also, a form of fire, right? So the periodical elements which are described by the scientists, these are naturally just more detailed aspects of the 4 basic elements, or more detailed even, I would say, aspects of the 24 or 25 elements described in the Sankhya philosophy and the Bhagavad. So yes, there's definitely some truth by observing, by empiric observation, measuring, analyzing, and by the system of, I would say, scientific inquiry, thesis, antithesis, right? This didactic method, which was already described by Aristotle, So these things are there, but there is knowledge which is beyond our senses, beyond our measuring capacities, and we are living in a world where we have reduced everything to the measuring, weighing, observing, and transforming by measuring. For example, people look through the telescopes, they look at the sky above us, right? Yesterday we were discussing at Prasadam, they look at the moon, and the moon has craters, right? And spots on the sun, people analyze these things through their eyes, with the aid of a telescope or with the aid of a microscope, right? But all these measures or these observations are made by imperfect senses. Right? So therefore we cannot understand the more subtle, the spiritual, the transcendent existence. So the reductionist method is imperfect, no doubt.
Thank you.
Is that right?
Yes.
You're happy with that?
Thank you for this class. My question is, we hear so much about that we are not this body, that we are the eternal soul. After these years of practicing Bhakti Yoga, what kind of realization did you have? Maybe connected with a story you could share with us.
Well, honestly speaking, the only realization that I have had it was through chanting the Mahamantra. Yeah. Chanting the Mahamantra and also taking prasadam, of course, no doubt. But chanting the Mahamantra, if you chant offenselessly and you hear, really you hear the mantra, not just, your mind goes somewhere and you just, just repeat it mechanically. But if you really hear the Mahamantra, you can connect with Krishna, who is pure spirit. And if you practice and you're sincerely practicing this chanting of Mahamantra, you can experience that you're not the body. You can actually experience it. Not intellectually, but actually. And I have very scarce realization in this connection. I'm not very advanced at all. But I know some of my godbrothers were very, very advanced in this connection. And they were suffering, for example, from some disease like cancer. They were obliged to leave the body because the cancer completely consumed their cells. You know, it's a disease. You know, material life is full of disease and old age. You can't avoid it. But they could tolerate it in a way which nobody could understand how it's possible, because they knew they're not the body, and they realized it also. You know, I'm not at that level at all. But I must say that by chanting Hare Krishna Mahamantra very sincerely, 16 rounds every day, and hearing, then one kind of like automatically almost, I would say, realizes that I'm not the body. You know, it takes time. It takes time to get purified. It's not that simple. You said with so many years, yeah. But Maya, the illusory energy with which we were associating so long, not only in this life, you know, but in many, many past lives, you know, can again somehow or other influence us to make us think that I'm this material body. So some of my godbrothers also left and live in the illusion that they're the material body, you know, completely absorbed in the bodily activities and bodily consciousness. But some other of my godbrothers, they were completely transcendental to the material body, and when they left their material body, nobody understood how they could tolerate such huge pain. You know, most of the people, when they leave the body, mainly in this terrible disease of cancer, they have to take morphine to lower their bodily consciousness, right? So that they don't feel the pain, so they're sort of like, you know, drowsy, you know. But as I said, my godbrothers, some of them left their body completely without using any of these, what I would say, painkillers, or like to diminish their bodily pain, right? So they were very advanced Vaishnavas. Right? There's not only in the Hare Krishna movement, there's many people who have also become self-realized in the sense that they're not the body. Some or other from their past life, or by their practice of meditation or other things, they can also come to a certain level of self-realization that they're not the material body. And there is possibilities. Myself, as I said, very little, not much, but I'm trying. Is it okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other question? Hare Krishna.
Большое спасибо за лекцию.
Thank you very much for your class.
У меня всякие мысли такие трансцендентные наводят.
Creating transcendental thoughts in my head.
Получается, что Господь создал мир материальный, совершенный, но временный.
God creates this material world perfect but temporary.
Да, и день Брахмы, ночь Брахмы, там, год Брахмы, жизнь Брахмы, это все для того, чтобы души они совершенствовались.
And all this flow of the time is meant for making the soul better, to elevate the soul.
И пришел Господь Чайтанья, это тоже план Кришны, для того, чтобы дать святое имя именно тем душам, которые уже более-менее совершенны, для того, чтобы понять духовный мир.
And Lord Chaitanya came to give the holy name for those souls who are already elevated enough.
Он только давал святое имя, только воспевали святые имена.
He gave only holy name, the process of chanting Mahamantra.
Это была подготовка для того, чтобы пришел Прабхупада и дал философию Бхагаватам.
And that was preparing for Prabhupada's coming, and Prabhupada gave the philosophy.
Но сперва было воспевание, и Господь землю подготовил, ну, наверное, Вселенную.
And first was chanting, and the Lord prepared this planet for further something.
Иначе философия без святого имени ее нельзя понять.
Maybe Mataji, you can translate better? You can translate into English maybe, because these questions are very, very elevated in Ukrainian language, and maybe you can translate? Yeah, but he has difficulty.
I also.
Oh, okay, so go ahead. Go on.
Философию нельзя понять без воспевания святого имени.
We cannot understand philosophy without chanting of Mahamantra.
И получается, что философия должна к чему вести, вот эта философия, для того, чтобы святое имя воспевать, как вы сказали правильно.
So the conclusion of the philosophy is the chanting of Mahamantra.
И после воспевания святого имени можно потом, правильное воспевание, можно вернуться к философии. Можно понять.
And after right chanting, we can then understand philosophy correctly.
Во Вселенной есть 8 миллионов 400 тысяч жителей.
In the universe we have 8 million for
400,000.
Yeah, 400,000 farms.
Из них 400 тысяч человеческих.
And from them, 400,000 are human beings.
Это тоже в планах Кришны.
It's also in Krishna's plan.
И из них только 9 тысяч цивилизованных.
And from them, only 9,000 are civilized.
391 тысяча – это уровень животного.
391,000 of living beings, they are on the level of animals.
Они просто совершенствуются.
And they just try to become more perfect.
Да. И получается, допустим, абориген, он занимается непонятными делами, то он будет все равно прогрессировать, иначе он уйдет в животное и все.
And even if these not civilized people try to make some good activities,
Допустим, абориген, он же человек считает. Нарушая принципы, есть мясо, есть своих товарищей. То он после этой жизни уйдет снова животным, получается, он будет обрататься эволюцией.
If a person make bad activity in this body of a person, but if he make bad activity, he will become animal in next life again.
И вот это 391 тысяча, у них развитие, такое, типа, по мере их совершенствования в жизни, они проходят какие-то опыты, и поднимаются выше, какие-то опыты в жизни и выше.
And it depends on our experience, we go up or down.
И чтобы им, допустим, дать книгу, да, у них нету этой извилины, чтобы эту книгу взять. Ты должен своим благочестием и своей садхамою, своей джапою их озарить, чтобы они взяли книгу.
And a lot of people, they don't have this opportunity to understand the Vedic literature and everything, and only thankfully to your sadhana and your purity you can distribute something to them.
So my question is, what is his question?
It's he tried to add something. It's not question.
But that's what I mean. Does he want to have a question or?
What is it?
Вопрос такой.
The question is,
Вот это 8 миллионов 400 тысяч жизней, 9 тысяч цивилизованных. Где-то написано в Бхагаватам. Мне это все сказал президент, я сейчас не могу найти вот это. Ну, храм у нас в Украине, не где-то.
the president of the temple in Ukraine, in Dnipro, said me that about this here is 8 million 400,000 living entities, and that 400,000 it's humans, and 9,000 it's civilized. And he asked where it mentioned in Shastras, because he doesn't have.
I understand now. Okay, so I just will answer in a very simple way. Okay, there are 8,400,000 species of life, right? And there are 400,000 human forms of life, right? And there's 8 million others. Plants, insects. Okay, animals, 400 birds, whatever. So Prabhupada said one thing, and that I think is just important that he understands and we understand. From the 8,400,000 species, 8 million, more than 8 million, don't need science. They don't need philosophy. They don't need philosophy. They don't need the Shastras. They're taken care of. They're perfectly happy. Yeah. So we shouldn't, we as human beings, we shouldn't be very proud of our knowledge, whatever knowledge we have. 8 million species do not need knowledge. They just don't need it. So we shouldn't be so proud of our knowledge, whatever knowledge we have. And they're doing fine, the 8 million species, you know. So we are human beings nowadays, mainly when you educated in former Soviet Union, where science was so important, you know, if you want to be a human being, you have to be scientific. That was the Soviet ideology. So we, mainly those who were born in a communistic place like Soviet Union, if you were born in, or let's say if you lived in Soviet Union, you were educated in school, a gymnasium or university, and you were instructed that knowledge is everything. And therefore we have the tendency, mainly I've noticed people who come from this very science-oriented place like ex-Soviet Union, which was before, you know, and now it's not anymore. It's Ukraine, Russia, and Kazakhstan, and Tajikistan. But in the Soviet era, people were completely and totally absorbed in knowledge, science. You know? So we shouldn't, in our Krishna consciousness movement, we shouldn't be obsessed with knowledge. That's my point. There's, just I'll give you one example. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada was an extremely scientific and knowledgeable scientific person. And he accepted as a spiritual master Gaurkishodas Babaji Maharaj, who was an analphabet. He didn't read any books. He couldn't even read. So, you understand? My point is that we shouldn't be taxing our brains with pumping knowledge into our head. He said that, I read this, I read that, you know what I mean? Gaurkishodas Babaji he couldn't even sign his name. and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, such a great scientist, he accepted it as his guru. That's the charming part of Krishna consciousness. So nice, you know. That or Param Guru accepted as his guru and an alphabet. It's super. I really like that. So please don't tax your brain too much. Just chant Hare Krishna and everything will be revealed at a certain time. Okay? Jai, Hare Krishna. So thank you very much. I think it's late now. Today is Ekadasi, so those who want to have some prasadams and take, those who want to fast, they can fast. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
His grace, Jayagurudev Prabhu ki
Jai.
Dear devotees, please forgive my shortcoming. I had the to-do to announce today's classes for the day, and I didn't make it to the Mangal Arati, so I do it now. And today's Tamil feast lecture will be given by Jayagurudev Prabhu. And Sunday feast lecture will be given by Jayagurudev Prabhu. Haribol.
There's no one here.
Devotees will come.
Oh, I heard about the Latvian devotees are coming. The whole bus is coming.
Yes.
20 devotees.
They will come, thousands.
I heard, yeah.
Haribol.
They're really ecstatic devotees. Hare Krishna. You also take a photograph?
Maybe I should come. Yes. One more time. Yes.
Gauranga.
What to do is this?
Wash it and put it in the cover.
For sannyasis. There's sannyasis plates. Mataji, куда это идет?
Senior devotees. The middle one is...
Middle one.